since our last interview, I interviewed Martin Shkreli. And he said you were an investor in his early company.
My fund that I worked for was an investor in this public company that he was a CEO of called, it was Retrofin. Yeah. He's an interesting guy. I wrote about him in my first book, Woke Inc. He's definitely, a lot of people say what they will about him. He at least has an encyclopedic knowledge of different diseases. But I remembered I probably invested in hundreds of companies during my time as a biotech investor at the hedge fund where I worked for 7 years in New York. And he was one of the more interesting CEOs, I remember. You'd probably take about 10 of these meetings a day. And, most of them are just, square, same sort of, stuffed suit. This guy was different. He was interesting. And it was certainly, one of the many investments that I made and followed during my 2007 to 2014 period.
Yeah, very smart guy. I was actually extremely impressed with our interview.
He knows a lot. He has an encyclopedic kind of knowledge about diseases. I will say that's one thing that stood out to him. Most biotech CEOs don't really know much about outside of their own talking points. It's kind of like politicians, actually. Right? They come to these investor meetings with their talking points about their own unique drug or their own unique disease area, but they don't really know much about, other areas outside of it. And, every person has their flaws and his have been well documented and well known.
Right.
But I remember when we had that first meeting, I was like, oh, this guy's definitely a little bit different than the others in terms of at least his knowledge of different disease areas and being self-taught despite not being a doctor. And I thought that was interesting for sure.
Well, you also acquired 7.7% of Buzzfeed.
Yeah. Number maybe a little higher than that, but yeah.
Okay. Well, what's the percentage?
I think you could look it up right now, probably over 8%. Yeah.
Okay.
Follow whatever the latest public filings say. That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, I was actually partnered up with Complex for a long time. And Complex,
oh, nice.
Yeah, Complex handled all of our advertisements on both the website and my YouTube channel. So essentially, they were an MCN. So the YouTube money would go through Complex. They would add a certain amount of money in terms of premium ads. Then they would pay me out after a certain number of months. After Buzzfeed took over and Buzzfeed went public, they actually stopped paying me to the tune of millions of dollars, essentially. And we actually had to sue them for the payment. And right around the time that they sold Complex, they settled with me for $50,000 less than they actually owed me.
Huh.
So, with the 8% that you own right now, you owe me about $4,000. I'm gonna put that out there.
Well, I'm a shareholder, passive shareholder of the company. I became a shareholder earlier this year.
Right.
But as you probably know, I know you're just sort of tongue in cheek.
I'm not actually expecting the money. I'm just throwing it out there. Yeah.
But I will tell you, you probably noticed that I became not only a large shareholder, I'm the second largest outside shareholder of Buzzfeed, but also became an activist shareholder, pointing to what I think some of the things were that the company did that lost its way over the years. And I've had some productive interactions with the company. But my view is that there is potential there, but that potential requires some major changes in strategy and articulating that change in strategy and acting according to it pretty clearly in ways that I have laid out in my public letter to the company's board and to the company in some meetings I've had with them afterwards.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, because it wasn't just me. It was a bunch of big YouTubers that were basically waiting on their money from Buzzfeed, and they were holding on to it. And it was really just scumbag behavior. I could imagine if they didn't get the money and they're saying, listen, we're not getting the money, so we can't pay you yet. They actually got the money from Google, held on to it to pay off their various expenses, and didn't pay me and a whole bunch of other people. And when they finally paid me, they settled for $50,000 less. And at the time I took it because I was worried that they might go bankrupt and I might get nothing. So, I personally think that the CEO of Buzzfeed is a piece of garbage. And hopefully with you being, an 8% shareholder, you could change that, because I'm still pissed off about that.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. And what I'll tell you is you can read my letter as an activist investor there. I'm clearly there with a hope of shaking things up for the better. But stay tuned and we'll see what I'll leave it at that for now. But you can track what's going on publicly there, and we'll see how that all plays out.
At this point, it is what it is. I've already settled with them. The money's gone. I just felt
I didn't know you had that affiliation though, and it's kind of an interesting line of business where so much has changed because the I mean, the way these social media platforms have worked have completely changed the success factors of these businesses, right? Because it used to be that through Facebook-driven traffic, you could build an entire business on the back of that. Mm-hmm. When that environment changed, when Facebook changed the way that it's allowing publishers of content to be able to actually drive traffic using Facebook, boy, it became a lot harder of a line of business to be in. And then Google became the primary driver of driving search traffic, but now Google is moving to clickless search, where using AI can effectively, without even clicking on it, which is actually what drives the ad traffic or the revenue, now without even clicking on it, most users are able to get what they need without actually driving that type of revenue. That's good for the Googles and the Facebooks. It's made it a lot harder for publishers of content. And so my view is you need to think big about strategic reframes. You can't just be rearranging deck chairs on the back of the Titanic as it sinks. You need to be thinking about actually rebuilding the new Titanic. And, I think that creates major opportunities for people who are willing to be bold. People are especially be willing to be bold with a brand. I mean, historically, it used to be that a media conglomerate, there could be many efficiencies of scale or whatever from being a conglomerate. Right now, if you're going to have a conglomerate media, I think the number one thing you need is a distinctive brand that defines who you are, what you stand for. So every employee, every customer, every user, every advertiser knows exactly what they're getting with you rather than with somebody else. Because if it weren't for that, you have an independent content creator economy anyway on the modern internet where you don't need the conglomerate brand.
Right.
But if you're going to have a conglomerate brand, if you're going to have a conglomerate, it better darn well have a distinctive brand. So from a business perspective, that'd be my view. My background was in biotech, as you well know, but taking some of those lessons, I think it's interesting when you take experiences in one industry and sometimes transfer them to another. On one hand, you need to build up your knowledge in that industry. On the other hand, you can bring a fresh perspective that can often be used to shake things up too.